Chapter 6. Ruthless Pursuit. It was him, the man who had stolen her innocence. Seeing him again, Lily felt all the blood drain from her face. Her hands clenched into tight fists at her sides, trembling with fury. Of course he came. Ethan Black would never let his prey escape. She had sworn to hold him accountable, to make him pay for what he did. Yet now, here she was walking straight into his territory. Ethan smirked, a look of satisfaction flashing in his dark eyes. His gaze roamed over her, unabashedly taking in her appearance. Her long, dark hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and she wore a blue plaid shirt knotted at the waist, paired with fitted jeans that accentuated her slender legs. A pair of running shoes completed the look, practical as if she was ready to sprint at any moment, cautious. Was she that afraid head devour her whole? Whether or not you can handle it is your problem, Ethan remarked coolly into his Bluetooth earpiece. But by tomorrow, I want to see headlines announcing the merger of Lynn, Core and Blackwood Enterprise. That's final. I have other matters to attend to. With that, he removed his earpiece, pushed open the car door, and strode toward her with absolute confidence. Stay back. Lily instinctively took a step backward, her voice sharp with warning. Ethan only chuckled. Then why are you here at all? Without another word and completely ignoring the stunned expressions of the security guards nearby, he effortlessly hoisted her over his shoulder and tossed her into the car. The movement was swift, seamless, unyielding. You arrogant jerk, let me out of this car. Lily scrambled up from the back seat, reaching for the door handle in a desperate attempt to escape. But Ethan's strong hand slammed the door shut before she could step out. He leaned down, his frame towering over her as his deep voice murmured, smooth yet merciless, be good and I'll give you the footage. Otherwise, he didn't finish his sentence. He didn't need to. The unspoken threat hung in the air between them. Lily's breath hitched. She knew exactly why she had come. Tadesh had to retrieve that video, no matter what. Slowly, she sank back into her seat, her face pale but her resolve unshaken. Satisfied with her compliance, Ethan slid back into the driver's seat and started the engine. His gaze flickered toward the rearview mirror, where he caught sight of her rigid posture. She sat primly, her bag slung across her body, fists clenched on her lap like a schoolgirl awaiting discipline. He smirked. He had to admit liked her face. It wasn't the most breathtaking he had ever seen, but something was striking about her features. Clean, defined, untouched by the artificial glamour of the entertainment world. Unlike Nadal, Iwalker, and the other women who had spent years navigating the industry, Lily possessed a rare natural elegance. He recalled she came from a wealthy family. Perhaps that explained her purity growing up in privilege, shielded from the harsh realities of survival. While others schemed to make ends meet, her biggest concerns had likely been choosing the best skincare brand or planning her next vacation. After a long silence, Ethan suddenly smirked and casually remarked, skirts or gents, it makes no difference to a man. The only thing that changes is how long it takes to remove them. Chapter 7. Scorned sanctuary. How could there be such a shameless person? He had already taken her by force, yet what more did he want to do? You pervert, Lily Anderson exclaimed in panic, trying to snatch the phone from his hand. Ethan Blackwood tossed the phone lightly, catching it in his other hand with a touch of cool elegance. You only have two options, Ethan said casually, as if the matter had nothing to do with him. He waved the phone in his hand. 1. You can report it to the police. 2. You can bring the memory card containing your secretly recorded footage to No. 13 Shallow Bay and exchange it for the video clip. The consequences of keeping a copy will be yours to bear. Lily clenched her fists tightly, her face turning pale. How could she have encountered such a man? I advise you not to choose the first option, because I will send your spectacular performance to every single person you know. Ethan threatened arrogantly, elegantly buttoning up his shirt and restoring his impeccable appearance. Send it to every person she knows. Just what did he intend to do? Lily angrily swung her fist at him, but Ethan effortlessly caught it. A cruel, cold smile appeared on his face. Lily Anderson, don't you dare doubt my words. With that, Ethan wrapped his arm around Natalie's slender waist and walked towards the red Ferrari parked by the lake. What did he just call her? Lily Anderson. How did this man know her? The Ferrari sped away from the lakeside, racing like the wind along the small path outside the wire fence. Her pale face was fully captured in his eyes, one hand resting casually on the car frame and the other gripping the steering wheel. A triumphant smile played on Ethan's lips. Lily Anderson, he never thought he would see this proud little princess again, and he had conquered her. The Lily Anderson, who had once looked down upon him with disdain, had been possessed by him, and he was her first man. Blackwood, are you interested in such plain fare? Why don't you let Nadal? I accompany you properly today. Nadal, I suggestively said, raising her bare, rounded foot and sliding it along Ethan's suit pants, inching higher and higher. Plain fare, having tasted this dish, it had indeed whetted his appetite quite a bit. All right, let's go to the hotel, Ethan suddenly accelerated. Natal, I smiled contentedly, her luscious lips slightly parted, as she gazed at the man in the driver's seat with watery eyes. A man more beautiful than a woman. With his devilishly handsome face, deep and prominent features, fatally sexy physique, and an air of unbridled wildness, the most important thing was his ability to command the wind and summon rain. This man was impeccably perfect. Natal, I wanted to firmly grasp this high branch. With a single word from Ethan Blackwood, he could elevate her into the ranks of international stars. Moreover, with such a heavenly bestowed handsome face, she would gladly accept being taken advantage of by him multiple times. Chapter 8. Tainted embrace. The air turned slightly cold, and the wetness and sharp pain between her legs made Lily unable to bear the weight, causing her to sit down with her back against the wire fence. The rough metal dug into her skin, a physical manifestation of the emotional turmoil she was experiencing. She had been the victim of a strange man's rape today. How could she, Lily Anderson, have allowed herself to reach this point, all for the sake of a piece of gossip news? Was it worth it? The question echoed in her mind, taunting her, as she grappled with the consequences of her actions. Her shoulders trembled uncontrollably, and tears finally fell, hot and heavy, leaving trails down her pale cheeks. The weight of what had happened crashed down upon her, and she felt a wave of despair wash over her. She had always prided herself on her strength, her ability to handle anything that came her way, but this was something she had never prepared for. With her slender hands clutching the collar of her shirt, Lily sobbed uncontrollably, her body shaking with each gasping breath. She felt violated, dirty, and utterly alone. The realization that her innocence had been brutally stolen from her hit her like a physical blow, leaving her reeling and desperate for some kind of comfort, some kind of solace. Tying the sweater around her waist to cover her ultra-short skirt and conceal her embarrassing buttocks, Lily barely managed to return to her home in the small flat, or more precisely, her uncle's home. Each step was a struggle, a reminder of the pain and humiliation she had endured. Lily, you ran off to stake out last night. How did it go? Did you capture any mysterious creatures? Her uncle, Mark Anderson, asked as he bumped into her while carrying his briefcase out of the house. At 48 years old, he had a receding hairline and a beer belly, just like everyone else. But oddly enough, he wasn't considered successful in his career. He ran a magazine company that always seemed to be on the verge of collapse, barely surviving. Lily gave a bitter smile, the action feeling foreign and forced on her face. No, I didn't. She had originally captured an even bigger scoop, one that could have revived the entire magazine company, but unfortunately, now she had even lost herself in the process. The irony was not lost on her, and she felt a fresh wave of tears threatening to spill over. If there's nothing, then forget it. I'm off to work. Her uncle patted her shoulder good-naturedly and walked out, oblivious to the turmoil raging inside his niece. From inside the house, her aunt's shrill and harsh voice rang out, "This life is unbearable. Mark, other men are men, and so are you. Others drag their families and move to the city, living in bigger and bigger houses, while you good, for nothing, have accomplished nothing, and even brought back a burden to live with us for 9 years. Lily Anderson was that burden. 9 years ago, when she was just a 7th grade student, her father's company declared bankruptcy, and he was thrown into prison. Her mother committed suicide by jumping off a building. Overnight, she went from being a little princess, with everyone revolving around her, to a disaster that everyone avoided. The memories of that time flooded back to her, the pain and confusion she had felt as a young girl suddenly thrust into a world of uncertainty and loss. She remembered the whispers, the pointing fingers, the looks of pity and disdain that followed her wherever she went. She remembered the emptiness, the loneliness, and the feeling of being utterly adrift in a sea of sorrow. Fortunately, she still had an uncle who took her in and let her help out at the magazine company. It was a small comfort, but one she clung to desperately in those dark days. Casually slamming the door to shut out her aunt's scolding, Lily took a shower. The water in her room was never particularly warm, always lukewarm, a fitting metaphor for the state of her life. As she stood under the spray, she let the water wash over her, wishing it could cleanse her of the shame and trauma she had experienced. But no matter how hard she scrubbed, she couldn't erase the feeling of his hands on her, the memory of his breath hot against her skin. In the mirror, several red bruises from being pinched could be seen on her snow-white skin, looking shocking and disturbing. The physical evidence of her assault was undeniable, a stark reminder of the violation she had suffered. The man who had taken everything from her vividly returned to her mind, his face leering at her from the depths of her memory. She shuddered, feeling a wave of revulsion wash over her at the thought of him touching her, violating her in the most intimate way possible. Chapter 9. frayed dignity, his scorching breath, his deep, demonic voice, enveloped her tightly, devouring her, stripping away her innocence. His hands roamed and groped her body without restraint, leaving no part of her untouched. She could still feel the ghosting sensation of his fingers on her skin, a sickening reminder of the violation she had endured. His kisses were like pillaging, biting every inch of her like a beast, a predator claiming his prey. The memory of his lips on her body made her stomach churn, and a wave of nausea washed over her. How could there be such a shameless and despicable man? What had she done to deserve this fate, to be subjected to such a vile and reprehensible act? Swoosh, not wanting to think about it any further, Lily impulsively turned the faucet to cold. The icy water from the shower head poured down, making her shiver but feeling much more comfortable. The chill helped to numb her mind and dull the pain and the shame that threatened to consume her. Changing into a nightgown and walking out of the bathroom, Lily directly tossed the sweater and torn white skirt she had worn today into the trash can. Disgusting, she wanted no reminder of what had happened, no physical evidence of the trauma she had suffered. On the old colored desk sat a childhood photo of her with her parents. In the picture, she was smiling extremely happily, her mouth wide open, a carefree and innocent child with no knowledge of the cruelties the world had in store for her. Back then, she didn't even know what sorrow was. Life had been simple, filled with love and laughter, a far cry from the nightmare she now found herself in. Perhaps the heavens saw that she lived too happily in her childhood, so they filled her later life with thorns, throwing all the bad things at her. It was as if the universe was punishing her for having the audacity to be content, to believe that she deserved happiness. Now she had forgotten how to write the words happiness. The concept seemed foreign to her, a distant memory she could no longer grasp. Suddenly, her eyes felt a little damp. Lily slammed the photo face down on the desk, no longer looking at the happy family in the picture. The contrast between the joy captured in that moment and the despair she felt now was too much to bear. Taking out the morning after pill she had bought before returning home, Lily gulped it down, the bitter taste lingering on her tongue. She glanced at the photography equipment on the side, and Ethan Blackwood's face floated in front of her eyes again, a haunting visage that refused to leave her mind. An arrogant, domineering, shameless man, the epitome of everything she despised, everything she feared. But she still had to find that man. As much as the thought of facing him again filled her with dread, she knew she had no choice. That man could call out her name, so he must know her. There was a high possibility that he would send that humiliating short video to everyone she knew. The idea of her shame being broadcast to the world, of everyone she cared about seeing her in such a vulnerable and degrading position, was unbearable. How could she continue to survive in this city then? How could she wait for her father to be released from prison, knowing that her reputation had been irreparably tarnished? She couldn't let that short video get out. She could only think of it as being bit by a dog, a wound that she would have to put up with to preserve what little dignity she still had. Lily arrived at Shallow Bay the next day, but was stopped outside the community. The luxurious surroundings seemed to mock her, a reminder of the world of wealth and privilege that Ethan inhabited, a world that she could never hope to be a part of. She had long heard Shallow Bay was a luxury residential community, home to the top tier of the country's pyramid. She had no choice but to wait for a slim chance, to hope that fate would grant her the opportunity to confront her tormentor. After an unknown time, the dedicated security guard suddenly opened the gate and walked outside, bowing and scraping. Blackwood is back. A dazzling red Ferrari sped into the community like flying, brushing past her. The vehicle was a sleek and powerful machine, a reflection of its owner's wealth and status. Lily didn't even have time to get a clear look at the figure in the car, her heart pounding in her chest as she realized that the moment she had been dreading had finally arrived. The next second, the Ferrari rapidly reversed and stopped in front of her. The sudden movement made her flinch, her body instinctively recoiling from the source of her trauma. In the driver's seat sat a man with clean, simple short hair, a deeply handsome face, and a perfect side profile. A pair of deep eyes stared at her with interest as if looking at prey, adding a touch of charm. Chapter 10, The Bitter Reunions. It was that scumbag who stole her innocence. Upon seeing him again, Lily's face drained of all color, her hands clenched into white, knuckled fists hanging rigidly at her sides. He had come for her just as she feared. The prey Ethan Blackwood had set his sights on could never escape from the grasp of his rapacious clutches. She had cried out repeatedly that she would report him for rape, and yet here she was, obediently delivering herself to the wolf's den. Ethan allowed the corner of his mouth to curl into a victorious sneer as his gaze raked over her body with an undisguised carnal appraisal. Her long raven tresses were bound into a practical ponytail, the powder blue button, down knotted at her slim waist, taut denim jeans hugging her shapely legs, and sensible running shoes adorning her feet. Clearly, she had come prepared to flee if necessary. How cautious of her. Did the gullible girl truly think that her modest clothing and shoes would keep him from devouring her? Whether you're digestible or not is a question of my capabilities, not yours. Just ensure the headlines announce Lynn or merger with Blackwood Enterprises by tomorrow. That's all for now. I have other matters to attend to. With that curt dismissal, Ethan removed his Bluetooth earpiece and shoved open the car door, stalking toward her with predatory entitlement. Don't come any closer. Lily reacted on instinct, backpedaling away from his advance. Then I failed to see the purpose behind you gracing me with your presence, he scoffed derisively. Before the stunned eyes of the doorman, Ethan easily scooped up Lily's slender frame and slung her over his shoulder in one smooth, domineering motion before tossing her into the back seat of the idling luxury sedan. The arrogant, high-handed actions seemed to flow together seamlessly, each more appalling than the last. You bastard, let me out of this car right now. Lily struggled to sit upright in the rear cabin, hands fumbling for the door latch in her desperation to escape. But Ethan leaned his powerful torso through the open door, pinning it closed as he loomed over her, his expression a mixture of dark promise and depravity, his voice a seductive purr of soul. Let Menace be a good girl and do as you're told, and I'll give you the video. Otherwise, he left the vile insinuation hanging ominously unfinished in the air between them. But his unspeakable meaning could not have been more lucidly conveyed. With no recourse, Lily could only sit upright and deathly pale, her shoulders slumping in surrender. She could not afford to forget her objective today. She had to recover that video at any cost, no matter how much it sickened her soul. Satisfied with her compliance, Ethan returned to the driver's seat and started the engine. Glancing at her in the rear view, he saw she was sitting rigidly proper, back painfully straight, knees pressed together with her hands loosely fisted atop them in a picture of childlike obedience. A crossbody bag hung askance on her trim frame, the very embodiment of an innocent schoolgirl. He could not deny his appreciation for her facial features, not necessarily because of striking beauty, but rather a clarity and freshness that could only be described as comfortable to his eyes. It was a naturally alluring quality, the likes of which those jaded starlets like Nadal I could never hope to artificially cultivate after years of clawing their way through the insipid entertainment world's sordid underbelly. After a lengthy pause spent appraisingly studying her in the reflection, Ethan gave a mocking chuckle. To a man like me, skirts and jeans are merely the difference between removing them quickly or slowly.